when you just can't get over it, when you can't just get over it. And without question, there's some things in life that are not easy to get past and to get over. And like that picture suggests, they're like hurdles. Now, I don't know if you've done hurdles in a while, but I think most of us might have a little bit of a challenge. You ever notice that sometimes on a video or an Olympics, that sometimes what other people make look easy is not easy? Can you imagine right now having to go down that 100-yard track and jumping, I don't know what it is, 15, 20 hurdles along the way? I think we might all look a little awkward. What are you thinking, Mondo? You thinking you got it tonight?
No,
cane boot and all. Let's just,
I couldn't do that when I was 12.
There you go.
Our phys ed teacher in Scott Park in the late 70s was a retired football player, and he would race the football guys, the football players, and they would just run straight, and he would do the hurdles, and he would win.
Wow.
He
Yeah.
did. He had Olympic records for persons over 55.
Wow.
That still have not been broken. But yeah, he would race them, and he would do the hurdles beside them, and still win.
Very good. Yeah, if only we all could. But I'm glad someone out there that can do the hurdles, right? And the truth is, right, when it comes to these things, there's some things that others sometimes make look easy in life, but are just not easy for you. And when it comes to spiritual things, all right, when it comes to certain areas of real life, practical obedience to God, sometimes there are some pretty big hurdles. Sometimes there's some pretty big things to get past. And sometimes to put something in the rearview mirror is maybe not as easy for you as maybe you feel like it is for someone else. So we're going to go through some of these things. I hope there's a 10-part kind of series we'll be looking at together, different things that sometimes are hard for people to get over and get past, and we'll kind of look at those together. But why don't you help me tonight? What are some areas in life that you think might be difficult for people to get past or to get over? What are some things that sometimes stick to us that's maybe not easy to get past? All right, Larry? All right, a breakup in a marriage. All right, for sure. Yes. All right, feeling betrayed by someone. What else? Yes.
Some life-changing health issues.
Okay, yeah, life-changing health issues. And obviously the physical aspects sometimes we'll never be able to get past, but the truth is sometimes, that comes with sometimes emotional feelings as well that are hard to deal with. Yes. All right, personal failures. Sometimes trying something and failing at something. You ever tried to do something, then failed and just felt like, I don't ever want to try again. I'm just not interested in trying again. And sometimes we just don't get past that. Meredith, did you have another one?
Death, and then just, I had some health issues.
Okay.
And it was just a feeling of lack of control and fear in the middle of it.
Okay.
Death, it just came.
Yeah, death, losing someone and going through that. And then feelings of helplessness. Sometimes when life just gets beyond our control. Yes? All right, betrayal. Yeah, for sure. And the feelings associated with it. Anyone have anything else? And I'm sure we'll look at some things that we'll think of, and we'll look at some things that we don't think of. Yes? All right, a job loss. And sometimes, it can be such an emotional thing when people go through a job loss that sometimes people don't want to get another job or don't want to apply for another job, and it can just be very discouraging sometimes to go through those processes. Those are good thoughts. Yes, Doug?
For those who got married later, saved later in life, the moral issue is a pretty tough one for some of them.
Sure. Yeah. Some different areas of moral decisions and sometimes some background. Yeah, it can be challenging. I think and I just hit on sometimes getting past our own regrets. For all of us, sometimes we look back and there's things that we've done and sometimes things that we still struggle with that we feel very strong regret towards. That can be hard to just get past, Meredith, you have another thought?
Yeah, because Joe Public doesn't want to admit it, but loneliness.
Okay, loneliness. Yeah, getting past loneliness. I know my wife and I were talking, and this makes you think of it here a couple days ago, and we were talking about thoughts, and sometimes when something happens and your brain is just running, it's just going fast, and you're just wishing, I wish I could just stop thinking about this. I wish I could just turn it off, and sometimes it's not easy to just say, I'm not going to think about it. And we were kind of laughing together because the reality is that sometimes other people's advice is just stop thinking about it. And you gotta I just wish it was that easy, right? I just wish I could stop thinking about it. But sometimes there's things that are hard to get over. Sometimes there's things that are hard to get past. So we're going to talk about some of those things as we go through this. Yes, Mondo?
Insomnia.
Oh, insomnia, yeah. I can't help you. You're stuck. I mean, melatonin, right? You know? All right, so yeah, some of those things. I'm with you, brother. I've been there. Insomnia can be a real challenge and can lead to sometimes some emotional challenges too. I mean, it's frustrating to not be able to sleep. I'm going to read a couple verses from Psalm 37. We're talking about dealing with injustice tonight. Dealing with injustice. How do you get past when you feel like you have been unjustly treated before? Let me ask you, how many people have been unjustly treated in life before? Oh yeah, absolutely. And we've all had to at least try at some point to get over it. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but that's not always easy. When someone has done you wrong and you know they've done you wrong, sometimes it's easy just to stop thinking about it. It's not easy. Sometimes it's hard to just go on with life without being emotionally and spiritually impacted. But I want to look at Genesis 37 and read verses 3 and 4, and then we'll take a look at these concepts together tonight. It says, "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him." Sounds like a bad family situation, doesn't it? Dad loves his son Joseph more than all of his brethren. And the idea there is not just that he loved Joseph more than one of his other brothers, or better than all, but it's almost like all of them combined, Joseph was a head and shoulders above all of them. And here in this situation, it led to some great injustice. It wasn't fair for the brothers that were put below Joseph. It wasn't fair for Joseph when he was treated unfairly by his brothers. And it led to some incredible injustice. But injustice is a guaranteed part of life. It is going to happen to you. You're not going to be treated fairly. You are going to have to get over that hurdle at times, but it will not always be easy. And so we're going to look at some concepts tonight that I hope will help us when we look at this. I'm going to read 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 23, because I want you to see here to begin the pattern of Jesus Christ. Because I want you to recognize that Jesus Christ, without question, was treated unjustly. All right, Jesus Christ was not treated fairly, and I want you to notice what the example was that was given to us by our Savior. 1 Peter 2 and verse 23 says, "Who when he was reviled, reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not." And I want you to notice the end of this verse. It says, "But committed himself to him that judgeth righteously." All right, Christ did not take vengeance into his own hands, but basically what the verse is saying, he left that injustice, that unjust treatment, he left to his heavenly Father and committed himself to the only one that is ever going to balance the scales, and that, of course, is God himself. So we're going to look at some things, I hope, tonight that will help us see the nature of injustice, what injustice is, and the reality of dealing with it in our lives and getting past it. I'm going to read Job chapter 5 and verse 7, also as we get started here. Job chapter 5 and verse 7, it says this, "Yea, man is born unto trouble as the sparks fly upward." And I just want to lay out this very simple principle at the beginning of our lesson, and that is this: because we live in a broken world, we are going to deal with injustice and trouble. Now help me tonight, how would you define injustice? When I say something is injustice, how would you define that? What would you consider to be injustice if you had to explain it to someone else? What is injustice? All right, Doug?
An offense?
All right, an offense? Often someone doing something against you. Yes, Larry? all right, something you don't deserve, something that is not deserved. Or maybe on the flip side, also, being given something that you didn't deserve, but also maybe not being given something that you did deserve. What else would you think of as injustice? Yes?
Oh, the power that a dictator has
Okay.
over the whole country. Not to bring up the Russia-Ukraine
Sure.
but that'll go down in history.
Okay, yeah, a power imbalance. Yeah, a power imbalance where there's one person that's making rules for a lot of other people and they treat them properly. I mean, I might think of the concept of something being unfair, something that's happening that's just not fair. It's not the way it should be done. And it's important for us to differentiate, okay, because we are going to feel injustice at some times in life, but we're not always necessarily being treated unjustly. Have you ever had someone, I'm sure those of you that maybe have worked in customer service or those that have dealt with maybe the populace out there that have come to you angry and have been like, this is not just, this is not fair, this is not how it should be done, and they feel very unjustly treated, but maybe what you're doing is perfectly just, perfectly fair, and sometimes we can get a very weird construct in our mind that everything in life is unfair to us. I mean, we have that Eeyore concept that nobody treats me right, and that's not healthy either. Yes?
Yeah, okay, and second, what came to my mind, since I was a little kid, until now, I mean, I'll be 70 next month, so it's getting old. But
Getting. It's not the way this works.
Since I was a kid, the starvation around the world
Sure,
has never, how can people be starving today?
sure,
Like, who's in charge?
yeah.
You know what I mean?
And there's truth to that. Son, as you look at our world, and I mean, whether it be, the slums in a country like India, or you look at some places, and there are some countries, obviously, in a much greater way than in North America, that there's a huge disparity, a huge separation between those who have wealth and those who don't have wealth.
Seems like the same, I don't want to bring up the Congo, but it was a country in Africa, and it was like, they're going to starve.
Sure,
And I'm going,
yeah.
buddy.
Yeah, and there are countries where starvation is a very real problem. And we look at our world and see unfairness. Now, I'm bringing that up and hopefully helping us recognize it because in John 16 and verse 33, Christ said, in this world ye shall have tribulation. Now, what should that make us realize, okay? For one thing, it should make us realize that God has never promised a fair world, all right? We want fairness. There's something in us that wants fairness. We want to be treated with dignity and respect, and we wish every other person was treated with dignity and respect. But the truth is, God promised what? Trouble and tribulation. Why? Because we do live in a broken, fallen world. Someday, even the things that we've been discussing, someday, from what we understand in Scripture, God is going to fix all those things. All right, God is going to fix all the problems that are in our world currently, but as things stand now, God promises tribulation and trouble. Let's go to John 15 and verse 20. John 15 and verse 20. Arlene, did you have a question? Oh, okay, I couldn't tell. I saw your hand go up there for a minute. John 15 and verse 20. I want to read this. It says, the servant is not greater than his Lord. If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you. John 15 and verse 20. Now, what is Christ promising? Is Christ promising fair treatment? All right. Is Christ promising that everything in the world is going to be, the way that they should be? No, actually, Christ said, look, they treated me unfairly. They persecuted me. All right. And if they persecuted me, they're also going to persecute you. And he's basically saying that the world in which we live, especially in the context of your faith, is going to treat you unjustly because of what you believe. And that's never fun, but it is what Christ promised is going to be part in the world in which we live. Now, the struggle for us is that there's something inside of us that wants justice, or at the very least, our version of justice. And whatever we think the rules are or should be, we want the world to operate in a way that fits our definition of justice. But understand Christ's promise, just even because you're a Christian, there's going to be some things that are unfair. Mondo.
So he's been treated unjustly, but he also left us a message saying, what you do to the least of me, you have done to me. So he's saying, that happened to me, but you got to get over it.
Right. And that's the basic thrust we're trying to understand in this introduction, is that Jesus Christ went through some terribly unjust things, but he committed the justice of his life to God, and he didn't react improperly in that justice, in that struggle. That would have been at least a very big struggle for all of us. So that's our first thing tonight that I want us to recognize and to work through, and that is this. Number one is the reality of injustice. The reality of injustice. Now, this is tough, but in order to deal with this subject, you have to acknowledge that injustice will happen to you. You just have to accept that. Why? Because if you are expecting a life free from injustice, you will never stop being frustrated. You understand what I'm saying? We have this unwritten rule in our mind that this is how my life should go, this is how I should be treated, and understand that may be very right in a perfect world. But in a fallen world where we live and where we operate, Christ is saying, in this world, you will have tribulation. He even goes as far as to say, if they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. Right? And if you think the perfect Son of God, Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, came to this world and did everything right and still suffered unjustly, and then we get to escape it, I think we're misunderstanding the expectations that we should have for life. You know, a lot of frustration happens in our life in general because of unmet expectations. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you go to a job and you're promised a salary of $40,000, let's say just for example, and you show up first day of work, or you get your first paycheck and it's $32,000, you're going to be like, boss, we need to have a chat. Because this was my expectations, and this is my reality. We might have a different reality. We might walk into a relationship saying, well, marriage should be this, and then marriage is this. And we go, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's not how it happened in my house. This is how it doesn't work. We might even have, when it comes expectations within church, and say, this is how church should operate, and then this happens, and we get frustrated. Why? Because there is a difference between reality and our expectations. Now, I am saying this to help us all process the reality of injustice, is that it is an unrealistic expectation for me to live life free from injustice. And if I am expecting, at this point, 39 years old, however long God gives me on this earth for the next, however many years, if I am living life expecting everyone should never treat me with injustice and it should never happen, I'm going to be in for a pretty harsh reality. And you know what happens every time that injustice comes? I'm going to get more angry. I'm going to get more frustrated. I'm going to get more cynical. I'm going to get more bitter. I'm going to get more distrusting of human nature. And although there may be things that I'm not treated rightly or properly, I have to recognize that in this fallen world, it is par for the course. Now, am I saying that makes it right? No. But I am saying it is reality. It is reality. And the world in which we live, man is born to trouble. We will suffer tribulation. We will be treated unjustly. That is, sadly, what life is about. And if I cannot recognize that reality, all I'm saying is I'm going to have a very hard time processing injustice. All right, where's that injustice going to come from? Letter A there's going to be injustice from the heathen. We've kind of covered this in a short way, but some people are going to treat you improperly just because of your faith. And that's hard. If you've been there before, if you've had a family member that's looked down on you because of your beliefs, I know I felt at times, sometimes with family members, like, I've done everything. There's nothing that I've necessarily done that, you could point to and say is wrong, but just because I'm a Christian, there's certain things you don't like. And you can feel that at times. And it doesn't feel fair when you feel like, hey, I've been there for you. All right? When you're at work and sometimes you're frowned upon because of your beliefs, it can feel like you have nothing to say necessarily that I did wrong, but just because I'm a Christian, you're going to treat me this way. And that can feel what? It can feel very unfair. And honestly, in the world in which we live today, it's a hard experience. But every time you turn on the TV, every time you listen to the radio, often when things come up about Christianity, sometimes I know even for me personally, how pastors are sometimes characterized in the world in which we live, I go, man, that is not fair. Sure, there's a crook out there every once in a while. Sure, there's some people that are, not reality to who they are. But it seems that obviously there's always this characterization of people being disingenuous, and it's not fair. But this world in which we live is never going to necessarily treat people fairly. Consider a few people. Consider Daniel, who was thrown into the den of lions simply because he kept praying. Can you imagine how it would have felt for Daniel? From everything we can see, he did his job right. I mean, so much so that he got promoted after promotion after promotion, but then the one thing that became the issue in his life was what? Was that he prayed. And then he's thrown in the den of lions. Would you feel a little bit like Daniel, like, hello? This isn't fair. Obviously, he trusted the Lord and went through that experience, but the challenge, think about David, who had served King Saul and God well. Isaiah 43 and verse 1, it says, "Judge me, O God, and plead my cause against an ungodly nation. O deliver me from the deceitful and the unjust man." Now, God doesn't put a name on that one, but I have to wonder when I hear that deceitful and unjust man, if maybe there's moments that Saul was in that blank. The man that had lied about him, the man that was unfairly chasing him. Can you imagine being David, thrown out of his home, thrown away from everybody that he loved, because he was treated what? Unfairly, very unjustly. Let me go to Matthew chapter 2, if you have a Bible there quickly. Matthew 2 says, "Then Herod," is verse 16. Matthew 2 and verse 16, "Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise man, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem, and in all the coasts thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men." How many families do you think were impacted by that? It's easy for us to read a passage of Scripture like that and see a man so blind with rage, so wanting to have power and control, that he was willing to rid families of babies 2 years old and under. And we look at that and we think of all the families impacted and we go, how could a person do that? How could those families live with that injustice? But recognizing this reality, bad people do bad things. As long as we live in the world that we do, bad people sadly are going to do bad things. And it's tough, and obviously I think it's even harder at times if you suffer from someone who should know better, someone that's a believer, knows the truth and should live the truth, and when they don't do the truth, man, that can really hurt. But understand, as long as there is sin in this world, and as long as there's people that are willing to act on that frustration, people are going to do some awful things. I want you to consider for a moment, maybe I'll ask some questions here, see if we can think of it. What are some things that have happened in our world due to sin that have been incredibly unjust historical moments? Anyone think of any examples? All right, Larry?
Abortion.
Okay, abortion, for sure, yes. Yeah, the Holocaust. Was that where you're going, Jim? Yeah, and I mean, you think of both of these things. You think of people that never get to live, because of decisions of others. You think of, the Holocaust. Of course, there's so many spiritual things going on as well with the Jewish people, but all these people that suffered, and just incredibly because of the actions of others. Yes? Yeah, yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, Rwanda, different countries that have gone through just incredible genocide, and based on the actions of people, again, in all of these situations, people doing wrong things, right? And other people suffering. Now, this is a tough part of being human and recognizing the consequences of sin in our world, and that is this. It is not just people that do wrong that suffer because of sin, but there's many innocent people that suffer because of sin, right? It's not just the person that's the one that acts, it's the person that receives. It's the person that sometimes goes through the agony of another person's choices. Like, how do we talk through things like someone suffering through the sexual assault of someone else? I mean, talk about injustice, talk about unfairness. But that's one person's gross act violently against someone else that leads to a very unjust reality. And there's something in us that says that is not fair, and it's not fair. But sadly, sin in our world makes the reality that sometimes one person can do something that leads to someone unfairly being treated. And this is what God is saying. Why? The heathen, all right, and it's a strong word, but it's helping us understand this. When sinful people are allowed to act, unjust things happen. All right, when people are allowed to do what they want to do, when people have the freedom of choice to sin and behave however they want, there is a wake behind those choices of other people that are hurt. And so in the world in which we live, injustice happens. Why? Why is this a reality? Why can you write it down in concrete for the rest of your life that injustice will happen? Very simply, because ungodly people, sinful people, and even people like you and I are still alive to mess things up for other people. Larry?
Yeah, when you give to donations for those people that go on TV for the poor in the African countries,
Yes.
they line their pockets with your money. They unjustly do not serve the people that they're talking about.
Right. And it is sad. We're talking about financial donations sometimes not going where they're intended, and sometimes money not being used justly. And it is the truth of that reality is sometimes in order to get the money to someone, there's so much taken off along the way. And sadly, that some of those things happen. But yeah, it's not fair. And it's not fair, just basically sometimes because of the selfishness of man, right? I joke with my kids sometimes, and maybe this won't be a good picture to help you understand, but if I buy my kids some McDonald's fries, as I'm passing it to them at the drive-through window, I say, "Daddy tax." It's like, there's a portion that comes off the top, And sometimes, sadly, before money gets to some foreign countries, there's a lot of daddy tax all along the way before it ever gets there. And it's not always fair. It's not always just. It's totally just because I'm the one that's buying it. But hey, we won't go there tonight. But we have a lot of fun as we think through some of those things. At least I do. All right? Injustice from the heathen. Second one is this one. This is a big one. And we'll start on it tonight, hopefully finish up there next week. But injustice from our homes. Injustice from our homes. All right? And a lot of people struggle through the fact that home life growing up was not fair. And once again, the reality of our existence is that your parents were not perfect, your siblings were not perfect, and their wrong decisions do at times create injustices for you. And that's hard, but that is the reality. And we're looking at that because we mentioned those verses from Joseph's life. The fact was Joseph struggled with a lot of kickback from his siblings because of his father's decision. Right? All Joseph did was born. He didn't choose to be the favorite child. That was his dad's decision. And what a good reminder for every parent to not have favorite children because of sometimes the conflict that can create within the home. But here is Joseph in his existence that he is having conflict in a big way with his siblings because of how the home dynamic was set up. And he is going through this great struggle because of some of the decisions that were done within that home. If you're still in Genesis 37, I'm going to read some verses toward the end because I think this will help you understand the level of conflict, the level of hatred, and the level of injustice that Joseph grew up in his life. Genesis 37 kind of is telling the story of what happened to Joseph when he was sold into slavery. And basically in verse 26, they're saying, hey, if we just kill Joseph, that doesn't do anyone any good. And in verse 27, they say, come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. I just want to stop there for a minute, because they decide to sell their brother into slavery. And the Bible talks about the emotional state of his siblings by saying they were content. Now, what makes you feel content? When everything's the way it should be, right? When everything's the way it should be. I mean, I feel content when I've been hungry and I have a good full meal. I'm like, good. Everything's the way it should be, right? When you got clothes on your backs, when bills are paid, you feel like I can be content, I can rest, I can be at ease. Can you imagine his brothers hated him so much that when they sold him into slavery, that's how they felt? Like, this is good. Everything's the way it should be. Sometimes home life can be incredibly unjust. And it can leave people with scars that are hard to get over. And when we're talking about getting past things, it can create this feeling within people's lives that I am never treated right, I was never treated right, and I'm really having a hard time getting past this. Now, I'm not talking about this tonight to stir up old feelings and to bring back past hurts. That's not going to help anybody. But I am talking about it to recognize every single one of us in this room are treated unjustly. That is the reality of the world in which we live. And I don't want to be cruel, I don't want to be unkind, and I don't want to compare your injustice to someone else's injustice. I'm just going to say this, there is no escaping it if you live and breathe in this world. Because there's bad people that make bad choices and you feel it. Because we all grow up in broken homes in one aspect or another, because we live and operate with other broken people. And all of these feelings, if we're not careful, can create in us a mountain of life is just unjust for me. And it shouldn't be this way. And that's what cries out in our heart. It shouldn't be this way. This shouldn't happen to me. And in all fairness, you're right. But it is the reality. It is the reality of the world in which we live. It is the reality of the human experience. And the earlier I can accept the fact that I will deal with some measure of injustice, the easier it's going to be for me to be able to process that with God. I'm very simply saying, if your expectations are always here, and then this is what you get, you're always going to be unhappy. And if you're expecting that the rest of my life should be free from injustice, anytime anyone cuts you off in traffic, anytime anyone treats you unfairly, you're going to be so ready to be angry and frustrated instead of recognizing this is the world in which we live. Heaven's going to be great. But until then, we've got to deal with this world. We've got to deal with people that do wrong things. We've got to deal with the background of whoever we are. That is the reality. And we need to ask God, God, please help me as I try and process past injustice, past pain, and as I deal with future injustice and future pain, to make sure it does not stagnate and arrest my life. Because some people get so stuck on injustice that they're standing in front of that hurdle and that as far as their life gets. It's like, you don't know what happened to me. You don't know what I went through. You don't know the struggles that I... And look, I will never understand all of them. And I'm sure there's someone even here tonight saying, well, you just don't... I probably don't understand. But I am saying this, the inability to get past injustice will make your life stop exactly where it's at. And I need God's help, and you need God's help to recognize injustice is a reality of the world in which I live. Lord, help me to deal with it, to cope with it, and to move forward past it, just like Christ did, right? When he was reviled, he reviled not again, right? But he committed himself to him that judgeth righteously. And he said, God, you are the perfect judge. You deal with it the way that you need to. And I hope God will help us as we all deal with injustice. Let's pray, and we'll take some prayer requests together. God, thank you for our time tonight. I do pray that you'd help us to be people that properly, honestly, and accurately deal with injustice. Lord, I know in our lives we've all dealt with something that has hurt, and something that wasn't right, it wasn't fair, and it shouldn't have happened. But because of the world in which we live, it did. And Father, I pray